Hi, welcome to this episode of Thaddaus Dawson Speaks. Today we're going to go over our interview with Miss Darlene Turner for NeighborWorks. When we were in New Orleans earlier this year, I was blessed to be the keynote speaker at NeighborWorks National Convention. So here we go, Thaddaus Dawson Speak with Miss Darlene Turner, NeighborWorks.
This is a NeighborWorks Training Institute that we're doing this week here in New Orleans, Louisiana. The weekend before the Institute, which actually starts on Monday, we have brought together the homeownership leaders that do work across the country. They work with the counselors and the coaches that help people get prepared to purchase a home and help them understand the process. Everything from credit to lending to the appraisal, everything that has to do with the process of owning a home. And they not only do that, but during the foreclosure crisis, our counselors were very vital in helping people figure out how to get through that. Same thing during COVID. You know, they are there to help people kind of navigate some of the issues of life that come up. And some of those issues are good things, like purchasing a home. So we're here for that. We are based in Washington, D.C. That's where our corporate office is, but we work all across the country. We have 4 regions. We have one Western region, the Midwest region, the Southern region, and the Northeast region. So we've all come together today, those 4 regions, and all the homeownership specialists that work in those regions for a peer-to-peer gathering so we can kind of learn from each other and also learn from professionals, experts in the field that may just enhance our work and what we're doing. Thaddaus did an amazing job today of just relating to people, make them feel comfortable, and helping them to understand at the same time about reevaluation of value and heirs property. We're really big right now on trying to help people understand generational wealth and heirs property. And so I really appreciate his input today, and I thought it was perfect right behind the South State Bank that spoke about it as well. And so that's what we are trying to help people understand so they can help their clients understand this so we can kind of start turning things around.
Thank you, Leon. I met Leon 2 years ago. I showed up at the Appraisal Foundation in Washington, D.C. with a 10,000 Black Appraisers t-shirt on. And it was interesting because nobody talked to me for the first half of the morning. And what was more surprising was no black people talked to me until after lunch when they saw white people talking to me and they felt like they had permission. So that was rather shocking. As Leon said, I've been doing this for 38 years. I started when I was 10. So I worked for the city of Cincinnati in the real estate division. I was the first black commercial appraiser in Cincinnati in 1992. Ask me how many commercial appraisers are in Cincinnati today. 2. And I've lived in Atlanta for the last 18 years. So that's just to show you the lack of representation in the space. And so one of the things I've always been challenged, or when I complain, my father always like, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to sit back and complain, or what are you going to contribute? And so I am so honored and happy to be here today aboard the crazy train with a whole bunch of crazies with a lot of goners all around the room. And so I'm very thankful, and if I'm ever blessed to be invited back, please don't have me go behind Myra and Melissa. Although I'm challenged, I was late this morning, and I pissed Rick off. Rick does not like to be late, and I don't really have a sense of time. So, and I'm thankful and grateful for Rick. We flew in last night from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. We were there at Mount Zion First Baptist Church, and I was blessed to be able to stand by the lectern that Dr. Martin Luther King gave his first I Had a Dream speech for the very first time. So they have a series that they're doing called Farm to Fork, and we have a series called Outside the Barn. So we take it across the country, and the 5 pillars to Outside the Barn are reconsideration of value, heirs property, careers in farming and agriculture. And I know you say, why farming and appraising? Is because they're the two least diverse professions in the country. They're 1 and 2. And they represent wealth and food sovereignty, which we are desperately in need of both. The fourth pillar is aquaponics, urban gardening, and different alternatives in order to secure food security and food sovereignty. And the fifth one is policy. There's a lot of enacting policy around appraising right now, and appraisal modernization and appraisal bias. I don't really like to use appraisal bias because it's been used ad nauseum, and it's really systemic undervaluation. I've done a lot of work in the space, and actually this organization was built out of advocacy. We did a reconsideration of value for Terry Horton in 2022, and we started with a reconsideration of value. And the essence of the case was really not the undervaluation. It's never the crime, it's always the cover-up. The point, the biggest thing was he was ignored, and nobody took accountability. Everybody thinks somebody is taking care of it. So the appraiser didn't respond, the appraisal management company didn't respond, and the bank didn't respond. So reconsideration of value is the most important tool that we have to protect in wealth building. And why do I say that? Is because we're about to go through the largest transformation of wealth in history. I probably should start hitting my clicker. Don't tell Anita I outrun my slides. So, damn, you look good. We already covered and talked about him, so let's move. Let's talk about the wealth transfer. Opportunity or inequality amplifier. So Rick is also my coach. Yesterday he said I was speaking and I was looking at the thing, so today I'm going to talk to you and engage in conversation. So we're going to have a little back and forth, and y'all going to help me with the time at some point, you know. Okay, all right. All right, but back to this. So again, being on this crazy train and working with you all, I'm really honored because each one of you come from someplace and honoring your communities. You fight, and we don't do this work to be rich. But we can make a difference. And in the spirit of Dorothy Richardson, I think we all carry that spirit. She stood up and she fought for her community, as each one of us are fighting for our community in our own individual way. And so I don't know if I'm coming close to these shoulders that I'm standing on, but yesterday Martin Luther King, today Dorothy Richardson. As Grandma say, I'm standing in high cotton. She wouldn't say standing, but I'm very, very thankful and grateful for you all. And one of the things that I believe that Melissa was talking about and talking to people is what I always talk about is cultural competency. So we have to be culturally relevant and have some intentionality to the communities that we speak to. And in doing that, we have to listen. And as you see, I run my mouth, and this didn't just start. And my grandmother used to always tell me, have you ever thought about why God gave you one mouth and two ears? Sometimes you just need to shut up and listen. And we as advocates for the community, we need to listen. And in the appraisal profession, they don't listen. They always want to pontificate from a privileged viewpoint. And so if you talk about undervaluation, oh, we're not biased. Okay, but the numbers say. But again, to the appraiser's defense, most of the bias is systemic and the system is outdated and antiquated. And so we try to address that. I don't just like to show up and talk about the problems. We like to provide solutions. So one of the things that we have is a lack of inclusion. Over 65% of all real estate appraisers are over 50 years old. The same demographics go for farmers as well. Less than 7% are under 35. Over 95% are white. Less than 1% are black. So there is no representation in the space. So therefore, we miss cultural competency. One of the other things that we tend to miss out on is what I refer to as heritage value, which gets to be very important when you start to talk about heirs property and the way people look at different situations. Grandma's house, Big Mama's house, the farm. So again, this is the greatest welfare transfer in history. So I'm gonna get back to my slide. This basically talks about, and these numbers are a little bit old, so we have some dated some more up-to-date numbers as well. But these numbers are from studies from 2022, and these are from multiple sources. And it talks about the white median wealth is 285,000, Hispanic 61,000, and then black 45,000. So people were really saying, when I started this program and the administration changed, they were like, oh, what, is that going to really affect your problem? I heard somebody say, the wealth gap hasn't moved 1%. It don't matter who in office. Right. Black and brown folks are still at the bottom, and we have always been able to build brick without straw. Now they're taking the straw. So it's more incumbent than ever that we lean on and do communal building and work together. And just being here and seeing all the different people from across the country and the level of commitment. And the biggest trick that the devil has is that you're fighting by yourself. And it was emphasized here today that we are not alone and you are not fighting by yourself. You have a community and resources to be able to tap into. And hopefully we can be one of those resources. I started a little, I talked about the wealth transfer and why that's so important. To have $100 trillion. The low estimate is 84, the high is 124. So I just split the baby at 100 trillion. Only 3 trillion of those dollars are attributable to black folks. That number should be between 7 and 10 trillion. But due to redlining, systemic racism, underinvestment, and redlining was exacerbated by the Federal Highway and Transportation Department that broke up over 1,260 black communities across the country with intentionality. So again, when we start to look at value and we look at what's impacting value in those drivers, those impacts are still lingering. Now, last week, I got way off track, and I'm not gonna do that this week. I spoke at the SCLC 66th convention. And so I had everybody go around the room and raise their hand, say where they were from, and what highway divided their black community. Today, I'm only gonna do 3. And so what we're doing is we're collecting this information. So if you go to our website, info@10kba.com, and submit your stories, we will be putting something together real soon, and hopefully it will have an impact and be able to resonate. Does anybody want to raise their hand and volunteer and tell it where they're from? Yes, ma'am.
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, and the highway is 71 Highway. And there's a big project now to rebuild the neighborhoods that were severed.
Yeah. And so, and that's going on in several different places. And again, where the highway is an underpass, overpass, lack of access to the community, it goes straight through. The playbook was the same. And so when folks talk about we're not biased, well, it was intentional. So we need to be just as intentional with the solutions. And so one of my biggest frustrations with reconsideration of value is it puts the burden of proof back on the homeowner. You're not subject matter experts, so you can't compete with a subject matter expert in order to be able to do that. And we had been at the forefront of advocating for reconsideration of value, and then they finally put it into play last year as part of the PAVE initiative, which was rescinded in March of this year. So it's the #1 tool in preserving this wealth. And it needs to be done by a subject matter expert. And I want to help to empower you all to be able to go back to your communities and do it. There was a study that came out in November. You can't find it. They took it down off the website. FHFA wrote it. And so what they said was only 10% of all appraisals utilized a market conditions adjustment. So if only 10% is utilizing, that means 90% of appraisals are not utilizing. So 90% of all appraisals are inaccurate. And if you utilize that market conditions adjustment, it would mitigate 60 to 70% of the undervaluation that occurs. Who do you think that disproportionately impacts? Okay, you all pretty smart too. One more person on, yes sir.
Detroit. I-75 ran through Hispanic community. I-375 ran through Black Wall Street. That's two.
Yeah, and again, it's the same playbook all across the country. One more, and then we'll. Yes, ma'am.
I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, and there's a road that went right through the black community to like Cleveland Clinic and big hospitals.
I'm sorry you're from Cleveland.
I know, right? They called the Opportunity Corridor and went right through the community.
And that's been the playbook all across the country. And here's another interesting fact, or how many of you all watch Cheers? Or used to? This is a side note, way off topic. My brother always refers to me as the Black Cliff Clavin. He said, I know more miscellaneous information than any one person should. But if you go to any Martin Luther King Street in the country, it's going to be the second largest economic engine in that city, without a doubt. So again, there's things that are different for us, but there are some similarities that we share. And hopefully we'll have some strategies to be able to empower our communities, because that wealth building is really, and I kind of got away from wealth building, because it would take 500 years to close the wealth gap. It only take $200 billion to close the poverty gap. And so we can close the poverty gap and we can improve the quality of life. A couple of numbers. So this talks about her slide with the transfer of wealth and the estate tax. And so in this transfer of wealth, it looks like we're going to be widening the wealth gap even more. Again, why the reconsideration of value is important, because it helps us to preserve what we have already established. And it's kind of low-hanging fruit. And again, the burden of proof is put back on the consumer. And there are very little to no consumer protections for the consumer anymore. And during, they were struggling with affirmative action, and when all the lenders had to meet all of the requirements. And as you can see, the lenders don't really care for me, because I try to speak truth to power. And I was on this OCC committee where all of the lenders were supposed to be working on this appraisal diversity initiative, and they all really cared. But everybody that was on that panel was under sanctions from the Justice Department. So it was not like they were there for their benevolence. And so one of the things that I talk about is that redlining is not dead. It's just been digitized. And so in that opportunity, we have to give our community the tools in order to fight with. Jim Crow isn't dead either, I'm sorry to report. He just changed his name to James. He's got a little bit more sophisticated, and we have to be sophisticated in our approach. And back to what Melissa talked about, we do a lot of training for heirs property. And one of the things about heirs property, I usually like to give an illustration, but my money kind of tight right now. I give $1 and I let everybody tear it up. And so in that dollar, if we tear it up, you got a piece, you got a piece, you got a piece, you got a piece. So how much do you have? Absolutely. You don't have anything. And so again, we need to, I would suggest at the family reunion, after we drop it like it's hot, after the wobble, after the apple pie contest, after the boots on the ground, we have a family business meeting. And I know we don't want nobody in our business, but in today's climate, everybody, if you got a phone, somebody's in your business. And what you did with your children was amazing. that's a recipe. If we start them early and get them educated, this is really important. And with us speaking to communities, there's some way that we should be able to put this into the conversation. Now, back to the slides. I'm on limited time. Now, y'all keep getting off track. So a lot of times we're here talking about housing. So there's probably a loss of $200 billion a year in undervaluation. What we don't talk about is the loss of undervaluation in heirs property. That's probably another $100 to $200 billion a year. And the majority of heirs property is in land, and it's in the Black Belt, in the Southeast. And so there are several different things going on where people are, and heirs property is different in each and every state. So one of these slides has a uniform heirs property act, and you need to be proactive about planning. Over 70% of black folks do not have a will or an estate. And some of it has been, I'll say trauma, because some of the things that our grandparents thought was, if I don't leave the property to anybody, then they won't be able to sell it and everybody will have it. And they had a limited understanding. And if you have, again, those pieces of the dollar, the property is significantly devalued. So the first thing that I try to do in the States is establish what the basis is. And then we can see what the plan is. And then we'll look and analyze the highest and best use. We'll do a market study. So these are the things that we need to do. And even if when the property is fractionalized, in order to value it, you need to use a hypothetical condition or an extraordinary assumption. Again, these are things that you wouldn't know, that you need a subject matter expert like myself. But everybody that's even in this space that I work in is really not aware of this and how to do it. I talked about appraisal undervaluation. A lot of it is the watered down education that appraisers receive. And I would say 90% of the undervaluation is not biased. It's systemic and bad appraising. And so what the reconsideration of value does is it gives the aggrieved party the opportunity to be heard. Again, back to grandma, 2 ears, 1 mouth. The appraisal community refuses to listen. Recently, the Lanham case in Maryland was thrown out, and it was defended successfully by the appraiser. The whole industry said, I told you we wasn't biased, and everybody's out there just there on a money grab. They're trying to get money for discrimination. And I'm just like, really? Are we not tone deaf here? Since we started that case in 2022, we have traveled the country, and what I learned was it's really not, it is a black problem specifically, but it's a workforce development issue because of those numbers that I shared earlier. And also the other issue is the system is outdated and antiquated. And there's a number of automated valuation models that you can use. Technology is really taking a place, but appraisers are bound by use patent. So everybody has an opinion. It's the equivalent of us going to the doctor, and now we question the doctor because something we seen on WebMD. And that's what the appraiser profession is. So the appraisers are being sued, they're being beat up, fees are being suppressed by appraisal management companies, and the government hasn't really helped in the matter. There's always pressure to make a higher value, but again, what tends to happen is black and brown people represent marginality. So with, again, the redlining and the predatory lending, there was whole divisions that were built based on taking advantage of people. And because of that, black and brown people lost over 65% of their wealth. And now you talk about affordability. Now Wall Street and investment money is taking up the inventory. Typically when you see interest rates grow up like they are now, you see prices take a precipitous drop. But now because there's a lack of inventory, the prices are not going down quite as fast. And we are dealing with a reckoning in housing. And so some of those new strategies, land trusts, reimagining can definitely be an opportunity, but it needs to be more cooperative and doing a joint tenancy and shared tenancy, because a lot of the land trust models end up benefiting the land trust and aren't really opportunities to build wealth, but act more like rent control. So I've been able to see and witness that all over the country. And we talk about appraisal strategies, how to appraise land trusts. And I need y'all to pay attention and stay with the slides now. So where are we at? Reduce home equity, refinancing challenge, selling complications. A lot of times in selling and undervaluation, that sort of works itself out because the buyer either has the ability to put more money down or the seller has to come down in order to meet the price. The problem is when you're trying to tap into your equity. And that's where we miss out. So when we go back and we start to talk about these housing strategies, these are some of the things that we need to work on and be able to articulate. And hopefully I can give you all some of the tools to be able to do that. There's a handout in your packet. We also do, I'd be remiss without telling you, we have, can I do self-promotion up here? We have a podcast, the 10K BA podcast, and we're about to have a radio show starting on September the 8th, WUTU. It's a 1-hour program. It's called Thaddaus Dawson Speaks. Liberation through Valuation Where Soul Meets Soil. And it's a part of the Southwest Project out of Albany, Georgia. And it is, I don't know how familiar you are with the Southwest Project, but it was an outgrowth out of Charles and Shirley Sherrod, and they had the first land trust in the country in 1969. Pastor Sherrod was a part of SNCC and the movement, and so when he went to Albany and signed folks up to vote, to the voter registration, they then started to get kicked off of their property and be disposed. So he then went to Israel and studied the kibbutz and communal living and modified it and brought it back to Albany, Georgia, and they bought 6,600 acres. And they did cooperative living. And they did that for about 15 or 20 years. And due to discriminatory practices with the FSA and USDA, they lost the property. Years later, they won $15 million in the Pickford lawsuit. Now remember, they started with 6,600 acres. 20 years later, they can only buy 1,600 acres with the $15 million. But they did do that, and they're still there today. But I say all that to say, again, reconsideration of value is an opportunity, and when you lose that opportunity, you lose the velocity of money, which then tends to have a negative impact on generational wealth. I really wish you could stay with the slides. Now, y'all, I'm not going to invite y'all back if y'all don't. This just talks about what undervaluation is not. A lot of times in doing improvement, it's always funny managing the expectation. So if I go to somebody's house, they're like, oh, I just put a new roof on. Okay. Well, I spent $10,000 on the roof. All right, well, you pretty much need a roof. It's not going to necessarily add value, but then it might add appeal. So you got a basic 30-year shingle. Now you got a 45-year architectural shingle. But some things are basic maintenance. So what we have to do is manage the expectation. And there's two different concepts in that process. It's called value in use and value in exchange. So if you add a pool and you spend $100,000 on the pool, you might not get $100,000 back in value. What you might recognize in value is $50,000, but then the other $50,000 you're going to enjoy because your family going to be swimming and having a good time. So you're going to use the utility of it. So these are things that a lot of times we're just managing the expectation. And every appraisal that I look at is not biased. And so then I'm into an argument with folks about the expectation. This just happened to me recently. Somebody else had appraised it in our office. And he said, so you telling me this $100,000 I spent wasn't worth nothing? I'm not telling you that, sir. He said, well, I already got an appraisal, and you saying it's only worth $400, and it was worth $400 when I bought. I said, well, here's what we'll do. Send me the appraisal, and whatever we missed, we'll take a look at it. And I am not perfect. And what I try to encourage the young appraisers is to don't worry about being right. Worry about getting it right. And that gets back to listening. And a lot of times the appraisal community is so stuck on being right. Oh, dare you challenge me. But then if you look at the demographics, over 65% are over 50, 95% white. You know, pretty much whatever I say has gone my whole entire life, and here you come questioning me. Right. So this is where the industry is, and one of the reasons I decided to focus on the young folks, because folks like me, it's too late. I got problems with change. And one of the reasons why I focus on the young folks is they help me be relevant. 20 minutes, thank you. And what Maya did was so amazing. Her playlist. Now, I got my own playlist, but y'all probably, I got my own playlist, but I'm just going to give y'all my favorite song, and this is going to lead off our radio show. And you all probably how many of y'all have seen Sinners? It's on the soundtrack. It's the very last song when the movie's going off. Set My People Free by Rod Wave. That's my favorite song. I start with that every single day. That's my dream. So my dream is to set my people free through valuation. So if y'all get a chance, you know, I can't do what you do. I can only do what I do. I'm going to stay in my lane. You get me outside to talk anything other than appraising, I might be socially awkward. Because I eat it, I drink it, I sleep it, and everybody don't want to hear it all the time. So, you know, if you don't hear me say anything, it's because I don't really got nothing else to talk about. But that was one of the illustrations about managing the expectation, and that's one of the things that you can do. But also, in counseling your people to get a reconsideration of value, you want to look at the factual errors if something was missed in the appraisal, the square footage, the room count, the gross living area. And why reconsideration of value is so important now more than ever is the appraisal form itself is about to change in January. This form hasn't changed basically in 40 years. And they call it appraisal modernization. Is it really appraisal modernization? Well, let me just give you a little glimpse of it. It's not, the modernization is how you collect the data. So now it'll be easier to feed the automation valuation models. So are you really modernizing the process? Are you really clean if you take a shower and put the same clothes back on? I'm just saying, there could be some cultural differences. Some folks might do that and it might work. But in this space, modernizing the process is really going to be necessary. And you all educating and advocating your constituents is going to be important. And everybody thinks they know about appraising, and they don't. I know somebody talking about the doctor. You know, if you got a heart problem, you don't want to go see a podiatrist. You want to see a specialist. You want to see a subject matter expert. And, okay, I'm a subject matter expert. This is some of the things that we talked about a little bit. I talked about the loss in heirs property. Black farmers lose $100 to $200 billion a year. And the big loss that nobody talks about is the black church. The black church loses over $500 billion a year in undervaluation. I spoke in Cincinnati a couple of months ago, and I think I had $75 in my pocket, and I was speaking to a room full of pastors, and I offered $100. I would have been in trouble if somebody took me up. But I offered $100 to any pastor who had a black appraiser appraise their church. No takers. I was on the radio the next day. I offered the same to any bank, any lender, any church, any denomination that had a black appraiser appraise their church. I think I only had $50 by then. But the point was there is no representation in the space. And so we do appraisals for farmers and for churches across the country. We also offer reconsideration of value in that space and how to articulate the argument. So in the space, we designed the first ever National Appraisal Apprenticeship Program certified through the U.S. Department of Labor. Of course, we got the program. We just didn't get the funding. So our goal is to go out and get the funding for these students in order to be able to make it happen and be intentional about it. And the way that we do appraising is actually changing. The GSCs really want to get away from appraisers because they look at them as a friction point, and they are offering appraisal waivers. So part of the problem now is going to be when your people get that appraisal waiver and it's valued at $100,000, and then they go to refinance it and it's only worth $75,000 when they get it appraised, that's going to be a problem. And a lot of times we tend to overpay just to be able to, as Melissa said, get in the game. And just one more side note. My team is always telling me not to use sports analogies because everybody knows about sports. I can't wait to get back and tell them about the football game. And I mean, they are like, nobody knows who Shedeur Sanders is. I used Shedeur Sanders in a reconsideration of value article. And what my point was that he was drafted in the 5th round. But he has a #1 selling jersey. If they had the opportunity to reconsider his value, would they? Cleveland ain't been this relevant in their whole existence. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Cleveland ain't been this relevant since Jim Brown. And that was before digitization. My whole point was the reconsideration of value is very helpful, and you can apply it in lots of situations. And it's about being objective. It's not about being accusatory. And that's what I tell the appraisal industry is we're not accusing you of being racially biased. However, can you please explain to me why you missed this market conditions adjustment or how you got there? So that's critically important. And I was out at 20 minutes a few minutes ago, so I'm going to click through these slides. And these are some of the cases of the people across the country that have filed these appraisal bias suits. The first one is the one that we worked on in Cincinnati with Terry Horton. The second is a couple in California that just recently settled for, I think it's $75,000. And the third one was another that settled in California. So these cases impact real people. And again, at the very least, it's a consumer protection and people need to be heard and deserve to be heard. And the burden of proof shouldn't be put back on the consumer. So in asking the banks to give you a reconsideration of value, I'm sorry, why don't we just ask the rat to watch the cheese? Right. You know? So there needs to be something separate from the bank and independent. Again, it's a consumer protection that the bank should be able to offer to their consumers. And this is one of the things that we have been working on to be able to help folks to articulate that argument. And because y'all ain't been paying attention, I'm just going to get through these slides because y'all ain't stayed on the slides at all. Is everybody comfortable with what a reconsideration of value is? Yes. Okay. At least y'all paying attention. And so, because she already talked about the wills and the changes, again, black folks, over 70% don't have wills or trusts. This is something that we need to talk about and maybe introduce in our counseling. Again, I believe in exposure. Then once we get exposure, now we can work on the expansion and the understanding. But if we've never been exposed to it, we can't expand on it. And sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And culturally, we haven't talked about it because we don't want nobody in our business. Now, we all got families. And I'll just talk about my family. When somebody passes, I mean, my grandmother would be flipping somersaults in her grave. All the struggle and sacrifice that she did, and she had 7 kids, And every Sunday, everybody's at grandma's house. And then after grandma passes, I say we probably got together 2 times in the last 25 years. And again, this is important because we need to know our history. We need to know our lineage. We need to be able to talk about it. And because my mom ain't talked to your mama since 1981, I ain't talked to you, and we don't even know why we mad. We used to play together. But this is business, and that thing that you talked about with the lifetime life insurance policy. We were once talking about life insurance policy. Oh, you trying to kill me? You trying to get rich off of me? Come on. I mean, we got to have these conversations. And it's nobody that's going to not die. And I tell my wife that all the time. Baby, I need to be able to grieve you properly. I want to spend the proper amount of time grieving you. I can't do that if we don't have this in place. I know mine's intact. I know you're going to be all right. I know you ain't going to never love again after I'm gone. But just in case, I want to make sure you're okay. Also, I done got so way off track here. Clear. I want to make sure I cover all the points. We got ROV. It really matters in mitigating the loss and protecting the wealth. Who can request an ROV? The homeowner. And typically, it's going to be whoever is in that transaction. Because you have USPAP and a fiduciary responsibility, you can't necessarily share it. But it is something that needs to happen. And we need to be able to educate and speak intelligently about it. I get so frustrated. Now, I appreciate Leon says that I talk passionately. Some people think I'm angry. I'm far from it, but you don't get to pee down my back and then tell me it's raining. You know, so, and I have learned to be able to stand up for myself and stand up for others. And so somebody just called me the other day. It was like, do you know how much more money you can make if you wasn't doing this? At the end of the day, I believe it's a responsibility, and I feel like I'm in a room with like-minded people because there is a responsibility that we have, and even it's frustrating advocating for us. Boy, it's hard. It's hard work. It's thankless work, but we all have a higher calling, and what did she talk about? Purpose. And so that purpose drives you all, because I know it drives me. And when I speak, I feel very blessed. So in DC at the Appraisal Foundation in November, they nominated me for something superfluous. And I told them that I wouldn't be back because I'd rather spend my time with people like you. I'm not begging for a seat at the table. I'm trying to make a table that creates opportunities, real opportunities. And this is where we can have an impact and a legacy. Bobby's got a legacy. You cannot be successful unless you got successors. So why is Bobby successful? Because of her. Not just her, but it's the spirit. Is Dorothy Richardson successful? Was she successful? Absolutely. So again, it depends on what success looks like. Is it power or is it purpose? I believe we all have purpose and we all have a calling. And this is, I'd rather be here than anywhere. Now, Rick also had a terrible idea. Let me just tell you a little bit about Rick. We rode the train for 13 hours from Atlanta to Rocky Mount. That was a terrible idea, Rick. Like we had time to waste. Now, Rick will tell you that I booked all of that stuff, but you know, I'm gonna put it back on Rick. But we did have enough sense to fly from Rocky Mount to New Orleans. We did our little train experiment, and yeah. We did that, so we don't have to revisit that. How to submit an effective ROV. Again, you want to put together a notebook, whatever you've done to improve the property, make a note of it. And when you look at the appraisal, if there's anything that's been missed, take a look at it. But the number one thing in undervaluation is market conditions adjustments. And how do you get those from the market and extract them? They have different models and different indexes. But again, you really need a subject matter expert, and you really need somebody that knows what they're doing. like you said, all lawyers are not created equal. All appraisers are not created equal. And so, again, a lot of times it used to be you could be appraiser if your cousin was on the board, and there was a lot of nepotism going on. And so we need to get to education, and continuing education should be continuing education. I'm being somewhat hypocritical because I'm just like everybody else. I wait to the last minute for my continuing education, and I find the fastest course where I can go point and click and get it done. So have I really learned anything? But I'm aware that what I don't know. I'm not trying to trick y'all and say I know something that I don't know. I don't think we have time to recap the undervaluation. We hit that till nauseum. That was me when I had hair and a little about 20 pounds. Again, talking about certified appraisers and reconsideration of value. Again, one of the things that we did in Cincinnati in the undervaluation, so the Port Authority had this portfolio of properties that they were rehabbing, and then they were getting underappraised when they went to sell them. And they were trying to figure out what they did. Of course, they ended up not liking me because one of their suggestions was to not put central air conditioning into the units, and then the people could put them in later. So I just said, so you mean to tell me you're going to give the most vulnerable population a house that's functionally obsolete before they get to it, and then expect them to come up with the funding on top of the house note to pay for an HVAC system? Well, they ended up getting a $10,000 grant from Mercy to start putting in the HVAC systems. So, but one of the things that we did in that was added the cost approach. So if you reconcile between the sales comparison approach and the cost approach, it raises it up. The problem is the cost approach hasn't been required in 15 years, and most people don't know how to do it. Back to the lack of education in the process. 5 minutes, okay. The last thing you can do is the income approach, because residential real estate is an investment class all by itself. All right, that just goes through the approaches to value. We do a lot of work in rural communities as well. So we talk about land. We wrote the heirs property, 3 hours of the heirs 21-hour train-the-trainer series for heirs property for the Southern Regional Center at Mississippi State. And so we tour the country talking about heirs property and educating about the impact of value. We talked about that, heirs property, you all up on that. Those are some of the impacts. And especially when you get to doing the highest and best use, the value impacted once you restore that fractionalization is amazing. But somebody talked about not being able to get a farm number, not being able to get disaster relief. You need to have a farm number and able to get that disaster relief. So you need to have somebody that's over the estate. So even if you agree to disagree, we got to have those family meetings. We got to have those communications. These are some of the challenges with heirs property. We all don't get along, but we still need to, for sake of, and have a value on it to be able to establish it. Oh, so one of the other things, and I'm going to sit down, one of the things that we've been talking about, farming and appraising, is faith-based intergenerational development. So urban farms. So it's hard to focus on wealth when your stomach is touching your back. And with eggs being $1 a piece, in some of the urban settings that we're in, you can get a farm number and get some help from the USDA and do farm practices in order to increase food sovereignty and food security. I do an entrepreneurial class at a school in Atlanta. We're about to get a 500 square foot container farm. It'll be able to produce 120 pounds of leafy green vegetables a week. This school is in the middle of a food desert. So we'll be able to assist the students as well as their parents, the teachers, and the community. These are things that we need to be reimagining in order to be able to increase. Even in community gardens, they should be looking at farming, and it brings the community together. And being it intergenerational, if you're worried about people getting down like me with bad knees, They have raised garden beds, and you can put a 2x6 on the, it's done?
Well, I wanted to know if you wanted to leave just, you got 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes for questions. This is the uniform partition of Heirs Property Act. It's different in each and every state. So this is specific to heirs property, and you can find resources at these particular places. All right, any questions? Did I cover?
Over here, Thaddaus.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. My question is about developers now, they are getting a lot of funding for affordable housing. And when they are building these units, they are below market rate units, and they have deed restrictions. But what I find is that appraisers usually have a hard time appraising a property that is at below market. So should they be appraising it at that price or the real price? So I don't know what is your take on that.
So what they should use is extraordinary assumption, assuming that it's at market value and not discount it. So the whole goal is to recognize the subsidy, not use it as a discount to bring down the property value. And that's some of the things that we teach in how to appraise land trust properties. So that is a very good question. And again, it's back to the skill set of the appraiser. So you either want to use a hypothetical condition or an extraordinary assumption, but that needs to go in the engagement letter when it goes out to the appraiser. So you need to define that early on in the scope of work.
And also because I see that there are appraisers doing different things, but when they do the actual market price, also would guys the property taxes and insurance. So there is also a way to mitigate that so the property taxes don't go up and insurance is corresponding to it.
So reconsideration of value also appeals to property, applies to property taxes. It's just at the other end. And over 90% of black and brown people do not appeal their property taxes because they think it's going to take away from their property value. That's more trauma that we need to be able to educate them about. And so you have some very excellent points, and these are some tools that we would like to be able to help you all with.
What is the evidence I can write of that when you mention about what they need to happen?
So our website is 10kba.com, and you can find us and we can communicate and get you all of that good information.
10K, what is it? One more time, please?
10kba.com.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Just a fact that I can share. Earlier you said that poverty cannot be eliminated, but Matthew Desmond, an author of Evicted and the book Poverty by America.
No, I said poverty can be eliminated.
It can be, okay.
I said closing the wealth gap. It'll take 500 years for us to close the wealth gap. And it can happen. It's just going to take 500
The
years.
research that Matthew Desmond has done and is in his book, Poverty by America, if the top 1% would pay their taxes every year, it would cover $177 billion eliminating poverty in America.
Oh, absolutely. And we are of the same mind. But if you talk to a billionaire and you ask them how much money is enough, and they'll tell you $1 more. So thank you all for your time. And if anybody took, we just recently were in New Orleans this past week, where I was blessed to be the keynote speaker for the National Black Growers Council. This was an amazing conference. We also got to see Willis Nelson be introduced as the board chair for 2026. And as you all know, Willis Nelson is the older brother of them damn Nelson brothers out in New Orleans. They've taken their third generation farmers, row crop farmers, and they've taken 40 acres, and now they have the legacy up to 4,000 acres. And I'm excited to see what Willis will be able to do with his leadership and influence at the National Black Growers Council. We were also in New Orleans earlier this year, where I was the keynote speaker for NeighborWorks. So that was pretty exciting. New Orleans seems to be our spot this year as far as giving keynotes with two very powerful organizations, which I'm very excited to be partnering with and working with, and looking forward to 2026. So again, one of the things that I found most exciting about the NeighborWorks convention was their outstanding leadership. And one of the things one of the leaders from Texas did that I like to try to incorporate now is she had everybody to share their playlist. And I think you learn a lot about people sharing their playlists and their music. I'm always shocked and surprised. I know that's one of the exercises that we do with our students. And I believe it allows people to be able to connect through music. The connectivity is really important in the work that we're doing. So I'm excited. We're winding down the year, Rick. We've been doing quite a bit. It's been a very successful year. I can't believe it's almost over. Also, we'd like for you all to come out to our heirs property reconsideration of value training we have from 12 to 3 this week at the Pierce Center at Pinnacle Financial Partners at 840 North Yards. That's right next to the gathering spot. So we'll be doing that from 12 to 3. And I'm really excited. We'll be able to record that. We've been doing that as part of our Outside the Barn series and taking that across the country. I'm looking forward to some downtime so we can come out in 2026 very strong. So thank you all for coming out and supporting us all year. Please continue to like, subscribe, share. We have a pretty robust schedule that we'll be planning coming out to bring the Outside the Barn series, teach heirs property training, as well as reconsideration of value. So look for us. Also, our newsletter will be coming out and going online. I know I've been threatening that. I've been publishing most of the articles on LinkedIn, but starting at the beginning of the year, we'll start to publish the Thaddaus Dawson Speaks on the 10kba.com website. So thank you all for all of your support, and we look forward to working with you, and we look forward to prosperous 2026 for all of our supporters, our partners. I just want to say thank you, because we're not here without your support.